We have to read from page 461. A more developed humanity allows us to make a better and freer use. So we are in the chapter where Sri Aurobindo is describing matter, life and mind, the triple lower Purusha. The triple lower Purusha. Okay. Or rather the lower triple Purusha. Remember the word Purusha always implies, good morning Yasmin. Purusha always,
Bonjour.
bonjour. Purusha always implies a conscious person. Okay, so remember use the word conscious being. Whereas the opposite is the impersonal aspect. That's Prakriti. Prakriti is normally impersonal. Okay. So Purusha means even for your physical, there is a personal representative. The subtle physical, there is a physical Purusha. There is a vital Purusha. There is a vital, because at that level when you are, the consciousness seems to be a person. Okay? There is a form. So we start reading now. This is the chapter he is describing the lower triple Purusha. So we start reading the next one. A more developed humanity. Okay, so one of you has to read.
Shall I read?
Yes, why not?
A more developed humanity allows us to make a better and freer use of all the capacities and experiences that we derive from the vital and mental planes of being. To lean more on support upon these hidden planes, be less absorbed by the physical, and to govern and modify the original nature of the physical being by greater vital forces and powers from the desire world, and greater and subtler mental forces and powers from the physical and intellectual planes. By this development, we are able to rise to higher altitudes of the intermediary existence between death and rebirth, and to make a better and more rapid use of rebirth itself for a yet higher mental and spiritual development. But even so, in the physical being, which still determines the greater part of our waking self, we act without definite consciousness of the worlds or planes which are the sources of our action. We are aware indeed of the life plane and mind plane of the physical being, but not of the life plane and mind plane proper, or of the superior and larger vital and mental being, which we are being the veil of our ordinary consciousness. It is only at a high stage of development that we become aware of them, and even then, ordinarily, only at the back of the action of our mentalized physical nature, we do not actually live on those planes. For if we did, we could very soon arrive at the conscious control of the body by the self-giving power, and of both by the sovereign mind, should then be able to determine our physical and mental life to a very large extent by our will and knowledge, as master of our being, and with a direct action of the mind, the life and body. By yoga, this power of transcending the physical self and taking possession of the higher self may, to a greater or less degree, be acquired through a heightened and widened self-consciousness and self-mastery.
Yeah. So in the people, when you are in the consciousness of the body mind life, which is our normal condition, we are very much hampered and we are very much limited. But Srimli is saying that when we go into the higher levels of consciousness, more power comes, more understanding comes, more knowledge comes. So we'll start reading from the beginning of the paragraph. Okay. So most human beings are, you cannot describe them as a more developed humanity. A more developed humanity would be when you are either more mental, and remember in the right in the beginning of the book, he talks of three levels: the bodily life, the mental life, and the spiritual life. So the bodily life is mostly, humanity is at the bodily life level. They are identified with the body and their desires. Then there are the mental, those who are more sattvic, those who are more using their mind and reason, and even that is not spiritual, but they are definitely at a higher level of consciousness than the normal man. You use your reason, you are reasonable, you are thinking of the problems. Researchers, philosophers, poets, all these are at the mental level. So, Srivastava, when he says a more developed humanity, he is talking of either at a mental level or at a spiritual level. So, a more developed humanity, not at the bodily life level, very clear, allows us to make a better and freer use of all the capacities and experiences that we derive from the vital and mental planes of being. Okay? So, whatever experiences are coming to your vital, emotional, and mental, you understand things much better when you are in the more developed humanity, okay, which is the spiritual level. We'll see what he's saying. And these experience capacities, so whatever experience comes, we can make good use of them. The normal man does not make good use of the experiences that he has. He goes on repeating the same mistake and he goes on suffering without any issue, without any solution. But the one who is thinking and using his experiences for improving his life, certainly he can do that. He learns. That's what Swami is saying. Make freer use of the capacities and experiences that we derive from the vital and mental planes of being. To lean more for support upon these hidden planes. The hidden planes are the ones that are above the mind. Be less absorbed by the physical and to govern and modify the original nature of the physical being by greater vital forces and powers from the desire world and greater and subtle mental forces and powers from the psychical and intellectual planes. When he's talking of the psychical, he is talking of the intraconscious. The moment you have entry into the intraconscious, your understanding improves tremendously, and therefore your knowledge also is there, so you can make better use of your experiences. Suppose you have a bad experience, you benefit from that because you see what is the mistake, why it has come, and then you can avoid it, you can solve the problem. So when he's using the word freer use of all the capacities, that's what happens. We have, all normal men have all the capacities, but they don't know how to use them. It's like in the beginning when you have a computer, there's no knowledge and you don't know how to use it. It is there in you. All these higher capacities are there in you, but you don't know how to use them. But when you go to the higher levels of consciousness, you learn how to use these instruments that are there already in you. Okay, so the psychical and intellectual planes. Naturally, the man who is at a mental or a psychical development, he is far more in a better position regarding consciousness than the bodily life man. Okay. By this development, the development of going to the intellectual and even the psychical, by this development, we are able to rise to higher altitudes of the intermediary experience between death and birth. So, what is this intermediary experience? Very clearly answered. So, when your body dies, your soul rises to the intermediate levels of experience, obviously, because you are in the subtle planes. Either you go into the higher mind or you go into your psychic world, so naturally you are in a better. So these are the intermediate planes. The intermediate planes, intermediary existence. So if they use the word intermediary existence, either it could be the spiritual planes or it can also be the intraconscious planes. The inner being, the inner vital and the inner physical. Okay? They are higher when he's using the word, it means naturally vertically up. That means the spiritual planes. But when he's using the word intermediary, between death and birth, where does your psychic being go after death and before birth? it goes to the psychic worlds. But note one thing, that the psychic worlds are not located anywhere. Okay? You can be anywhere, but you are in the psychic world because your consciousness is at that level. It can be in the higher mind, it can be in the intraconscious, it can be at the inner mind. So all these things are possible for the soul which is developed. After death, it can go there, and before birth, it can be there and then come back to birth. So very clearly, the intermediary experience is the planes of consciousness where the soul enters after death and before rebirth. And to make a better and more rapid use of rebirth itself for a yet higher mental and spiritual development. So when you are capable of going to those levels, actually what he's meaning here is that when the after death, the developed soul goes into the psychic world and reviews its life. It's very interesting that all the NDE experiences, near-death experience, when they come back, they always report that there is a very fast forward or rather fast backward reviewing of all one's life and seeing what are the strong points and what are the mistakes that you made. And then you learn from them. So that's what they're saying. You make rapid use of rebirth. You make a better and more rapid use of rebirth. Otherwise, the normal man, he goes and comes back again, but he's not making any use of his rebirth. Okay? Because he goes only up to the vital plane and then comes back again. Okay, note interestingly that all these cases of rebirth, okay, where they remember their past life, they come back very fast from the vital plane only. Sometimes the lower vital planes, but they don't go higher than that. That's why they remember their experience of the past life. They remember the house, they remember the shop they worked in. All these interesting cases are there. So that is a man who has not been very highly developed. The more developed you are likely to forget the past experience because you have to start on a new basis. The nature does not allow you to remember the past lives because if you do, then you are limited. You are bound to those things, but it's a fresh experience. So normally you lose the memory of the past lives until you become spiritually aware and then you remember the past lives. So right in the beginning, one can remember past lives without development. In the middle, there is non-memory, okay, memory loss of the previous lives. And at the higher level of development, again there is memory of the previous lives. So this is the law that operates. So Srimdu is saying, if you are developed, you can make better and more rapid use of rebirth. How? By a review. You review your past life and benefit from that. And then you take birth accordingly. You choose the conditions of your birth, where you should go, and then you enter into that body which is meant for you. Okay. I should mention also, most of you may be knowing also, but the near-death experience, okay, those who have studied, there are several people in the West who have studied this. In India, we don't study this because we have a deeper knowledge. But those who have studied the near-death experience, they have listed about 13 or 14 things that happen to the soul that goes out of the body. Okay? So one of them is you sort of enter into a dark tunnel and then you come out of the tunnel. This is one experience that most people have. The other experience is that you are met when you come out of that dark tunnel, you are in a beautiful circumstance. Either the landscape is beautiful or there are beings of light that come and welcome you, and there is unconditional love. That is another condition that happens when you go into the subtler planes. And everything is beautiful. You are without suffering. You are free. Everything is lovely. And beings of light come to guide you, or sometimes it's your own relatives who are gone before you. Just 1 minute, I'm getting a phone call. Sorry, but we will continue with what we were discussing. Okay, so the developed soul can make better use even of death. Because when you go into those higher planes, you review your life. I was telling you that there are many things. One of the things that happens is the review. All human beings, they review their past life and then decide what to do. So that's what Swami is saying in a very different way. You have to interpret it correctly. Make better use and more rapid use of rebirth itself for a yet higher mental and spiritual development. Okay? But even so, in the physical being, which still determines the greater part of our waking self, we act without definite consciousness of the worlds or planes, which are the sources of our action. Even when we come back and get back into our the new life with the new body and new vital, we don't remember what we have seen on the higher planes of consciousness. That's what he's saying. It is only at a high stage of development that we become aware of them, and even then, ordinarily, only at the back of the action of our mentalized physical nature. So, those who are very highly, that's exactly what we discuss. Those who remember their past lives, okay, they have not gone up very high. They have usually returned from the vital plane and taken birth again, and that's why the mind has not yet dissolved. So you remember all the memories of the past life, you remember. So that's a sign that usually there isn't much of development as yet. But as you develop, there is loss of memory of the intermediate planes. And Srimli is saying again that when you become even more developed, you remember your past lives, but that's at a very high level. But when you come down, okay, in the beginning you are likely to forget, even when you are developed. Then afterwards you can recover the consciousness. So we are aware indeed. Okay. I'll read from, but even so. Okay. But even so, in the physical being, which still determines the greater part of our waking self, remember that even for those who are spiritually developed, the body, the matter, because that's the origin of the vital and the mind. So there is still a huge influence of matter on your thinking and your emotions. We act without definite consciousness of the worlds or planes which are the sources of our action. So actually, the source of all our emotions, all our thoughts, all our actions are actually from the intraconscient or the superconscient. But we are not conscious of it. We are aware indeed of the life plane and mind plane of the physical being. We are conscious of our normal mind and the normal emotions, but not of the life plane and mind plane proper, or the superior and larger vital and mental being. Now, he is making a distinction. Look at the words carefully. But not of the life plane and mind plane. These are the inner vital and the inner mind proper, or of the superior and larger vital. He is talking of the involuntary vital and the mental planes. Okay, so there is a difference between which we are behind the veil of our ordinary consciousness. Okay, so the word here "or" actually is using different words, but they are the same. When the involution takes place, it creates all the planes downwards, one by one, it goes on creating. Over mind, intuitive mind, illumined mind, higher mind, and then finally our mind plane, and then it produces the life plane, and then the material plane. So these are in the intra-conscient. So when he is saying that, it's actually the same thing that he's saying, but he's describing in a different way. The life plane and the mind plane are in the intra-conscious, or of the superior and larger vital and mental being, which we are behind the veil of our ordinary consciousness. Vertically also, there are planes which correspond to these, the vital and the mind. It is only at a high stage of development that we become aware of them. The spiritual man, the one who has realized the spiritual levels of consciousness, becomes aware of these higher planes and also of their past lives. We can become aware of them. And even then, ordinarily, only at the back of the action of our mentalized physical nature. It's a faint memory. It's not always very, very clear. We do not actually live on those planes. For if we did, we could very soon arrive at the conscious control of the body by the life power and of both by the sovereign mind. Now, he is using the word life power, the vital, and the sovereign mind, not the ordinary mind. Remember, there are several layers of the mind. There is the physical mind, there is the vital mind, and there is a pure mind. So when he is using the word sovereign mind, he is talking of the pure mind, which is relatively free from emotions and the physical. It can think clearly, it can reason, and that's a sovereign mind. It's not a spiritual mind, it's a reasonable mind. Okay? Intellectual mind, he uses the word sometimes. So sovereign means not subject to anything else. No? India is a sovereign power. When you say we are not subject to anybody else. We were not a sovereign power when the British were there, but now we are a sovereign power, independent of anything else. So sovereign mind, it is not influenced by the vital and the body. I read the next phrase. We should then be able to determine our physical and mental life to a very large extent by our will and knowledge as masters of our being and with the direct action of the mind on the life and body. So the mind can control much of the life and the body. A man who is a thinking man does not allow his vital to influence him. He reviews his desires and his impulses and sometimes decides not to give it permission. Okay? That's what Shraddha is saying. You become a master of your being with a direct action of the mind on the life and the body. Even the body. I give you that a very famous example of Shraddha's much before he experienced the supermind, parts of the supermind and overmind. Much before that, he was able to control his body also. The eye went red, if you remember, and Champaklal said, your eye is red. Sendra said, come back in 2 hours. You will see that the redness has gone. So that's a control that Sendra is talking about. Right? Direct action of the mind on the life and the body. In fact, even Hatha Yogins, they can control their pulse rate, they can control their blood pressure. Okay? I remember I have experienced one person, he was not even an ordinary ashramite. He could bring down his pulse rate. Interesting, but I actually measured. Okay, we put in, and he could bring it down to a very low level. Usually it's about 80 beats per minute, no? But he could bring it down to 40, I think it was about 40 that he brought it down to. Very slow beat. Those who live at a higher altitude, okay, and those who are, for instance, in Kenya, okay, the Negroes, they run very well. They are extreme because they are independent. Their endurance is very high, and they have their pulse rate is quite low. They are very good runners. They win all the tournaments in the world. Okay, so you can control. So the yogi is controlling, the Kenyans and the Negroes are not controlling his natural gift by nature. They are not controlling. Sridhar is talking about control. Okay. So he's saying we do not actually live on these planes, or if we did, we could very soon arrive at the conscious control of the body by the life power and of both by the sovereign mind. We should then be able to determine our physical and mental life so to a very large extent by our will and knowledge as masters of our being with a direct action of the mind on the life and body. By yoga, this power of transcending the physical self and taking possession of the higher selves may, to a greater or less degree, be acquired through a heightened and widened self-consciousness and mastery. So, Siddhartha is describing the triple lower consciousness, and if you are free of them, you become more and more master of your own body, mind, life. Now, let me see. Okay, we can read one more para because it's 8:20. Okay, so, if you don't mind, I think I will stop here because I have a crisis at home.
Yes, I was just going to suggest that you have work, so you please leave, and next time we will start. This may be done.
That's right. So, Suki, thank you so much for understanding. Okay. So, I'll go and give that book of medicines to my brother.
Thank you, Rangadhar.
Okay.
To you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Rangadhar. Thank you.
Okay. So, I thank all of you for understanding.
Rangadhar.
I'm quitting. Okay. Au revoir. Have a nice day, everybody.
Thank you,